Here we go. I tried very hard not to open up with saying the word okay, since that seems to be my habit. That's my filler word. So I just probably broke a few rules of Dale Carnegie's public speaking. Anyway, hello, my name is Mike Zittel. This is class number 1 for the Metta series. I'm not sure what the name is that we went with. Metta training, I believe, is what they're talking about. So,
yes,
yes, that's what it is. Okay, cool. Metta, the Metta practice. We've had some people before commenting about, looking for a proper introduction to Metta. What is this Metta practice? Anybody that has hung out in these various Dharma centers or mindfulness centers probably has heard the term Metta almost as much as the phrase, go back to your breath. It's one of these terms that is just used quite frequently. So, as someone pointed out earlier, well, if you're coming in new, there's this assumption that you know what metta is. So this is an opportunity to really look at metta in different forms and expressions. So what I'm going to go to today is look at some early Buddhist views on it. And then as the course progresses, we're going to expand that into a little bit more of its flexibility and pliability. So having said that, let's go to the Blackboard. So I'm going to do a little screen share. Actually, it's not a Blackboard, it's just a Word document. Okay, here we go. So I am going to be referencing today the Metta, the philosophy and practice of universal love. Acharya Buddharakkhita. Forgive me for butchering his name. I will, cut and paste this into the chat for anybody that's interested. All right, I don't see the chat option right now. When I go back to full screen, I'll put that in. I'm sure somebody will remind me. Okay, so Acharya Buddharakkhita, he was a monk, 1922 to 1930, 2013. Buddhist monk and prolific writer. This is taken from Wikipedia. Established the Maha Bodhi Society of Bangalore. Earlier life, joined Indian Defense Service after his graduation from Institute of Engineering Technology, Calcutta. So, had led a full life as a layperson. He was an engineer, participated in World War II, and there was quite a few who, having experienced the horrors and tragedies of war, went forth and took up robes to, in this case, resign to find truth and freedom. So he became a monk in 1948, traveled all over India, also taught in Sri Lanka, Burma, and finally established Maha Bodhi Society. He established schools, hostels, hospitals, has written over 150 books, 2 periodicals. So he's a prolific writer. So I'm taking today's class from him because he has quite a strong academic understanding of the suttas as well as the early commentaries. So I thought that would be a good place to start in looking at this idea of metta. So metta, for those that are wondering, what does that mean? Well, it's a Pali term, has a few dimensions to it. Sometimes loving kindness. That's kind of the term that most people go to. It also means friendliness, goodwill, benevolence, friendship, amity. I got that one wrong. Concord, inoffensiveness, nonviolence. So it has all of that. So as it was stated earlier today, or earlier in the class, how is it that we can cultivate metta in this time? 2020, the political divide is just absurd. People are out in the streets protesting, and then we have counter protesters coming in. Unfortunately, there's also outside of people exercising free speech, we have rioting on one side, and then we have just outright almost, definitely state-approved whisking away of people into unmarked cars by federal officers that have no identification. We have people just pouring in out of state with Trump flags, openly shooting people in the streets. So, inoffensiveness and nonviolence. How is it that we can cultivate some of this in a world that seems to be increasingly getting more unhinged? If ever there is a time for the strong wish for happiness and well-being of others, as well as a nonviolence, I think today is very, very relevant. It was part of my interest in kind of exploring this subject matter at this time. The practicing, the cultivation of metta. As I like to say when I work with students and clients, and I say variously here, I'm sure any one of us can be given 30 seconds to 3 minutes and we can work ourselves into a lather of anger, fear, or sadness. But given that same amount of time, can we cultivate boundless state of kindness, compassion, appreciation, or equanimity? That's the challenge, isn't it? So this is part of the training process. Again, I always like to go back to this idea that back in the day of the Buddha, there wasn't really a term for meditation. He would tell the monks to bhavana, cultivate. Go do jhana bhavana. Go cultivate deep states of concentration. Go do metta bhavana. Cultivate metta. So, in the idea of the adage of neurons that fire together, wire together, this is a training. We are cultivating this mind-heart to be able to open to and enter into and abide in states of kindness, well-being, nonviolence. And the more frequently that we can do that, we can go from state to trait mindfulness. There's a lot of research on that. We have a momentary state because we cultivated something, but we do it with repetition. The brain has a tendency to find shortcuts by building some gray matter to create shortcuts, some neural architecture to support these things. So then what we begin to find is with increased metta practice, we can discern the presence of metta at our baseline state. So here it is, the practice of metta. It's an altruistic attitude. It reduces self-interest, and as well the toxic ways of being resulting from self-interest. So we can probably think of some people out there that are some very self-interested, narcissistic, craving, wanting more and more and more. It's never enough, and how that tends to erode one's value system. It tends to erode relationships. The more they put themselves and their wants in front. So this is an opportunity to practice a selflessness in a way where we're really truly wishing and wanting for the well-being of others. So let's get into it. Here in this small book that he has written, part of it is he makes a commentary on the Karaniya Metta Sutta, the hymn of universal love. So this is an early sutta espoused by the Buddha. Just blocking out the neighbor's conversation. But here we have a little bit of an analysis of it. So it's a little over 40 lines, but I just want to go through it with a sense of commentary. So some of us might have heard this before. So I'll go through it with commentary as we go. Buddha is essentially citing qualities, aspects of metta. Really, what does this mean? What is the experience of it? Well, how does it arise? What is the purpose? And what is the ends of the metta practice? So the Metta Sutta consists of 3 parts, each of which focuses on distinct aspects of metta. So here it starts off. Who sees to promote their welfare, having glimpsed the state of perfect peace. So who seeks to promote their welfare, having glimpsed their state of perfect peace. So it's almost like he's saying there for those who are kind of embarking on this path, having glimpsed some peace, and want to promote their welfare. And there's this dovetailing of these two, their own welfare, well-being, and how this can lead to a state of perfection. Talking about ultimately on the path, walking on the path to awakening. So here we have in the first lines 3 through 10, covers the aspect which requires thorough and systematic application of love and kindness in one's day-to-day conduct. Yeah, so this first part is talking about kind of the ethical part. Yeah, so one should be, if you want to cultivate metta, one should be able, honest, and upright, gentle in speech, meek, not proud, contented. They ought to be easy to support, not over busy, simple living, tranquil in their senses. Let them be prudent and not brazen, nor fawning on families. Also, they must refrain from any action that gives the wise reason to reprove them. Then let them cultivate the thought. Oh, sorry, I kind of tried to go through and gender neutralize this. Sorry, a few might have gotten by me. So these are qualities. These are qualities to aspire to, qualities to cultivate. One should be able, honest, upright, gentle in speech, meek and not proud, content. Ought to be easy to support, not overly busy. Good luck with that. Simple and living, tranquil in their senses. Let them be prudent. So in the Buddhist world of ethics, there's twofold ethics. Yeah. So there's the karita and the varita. One is the fulfillment of certain virtues, the cultivation of virtues and precepts, and then the abstinence, varita. So in Buddhist ethics, there's this interplay between what is it that can be cultivated and what is it that we can restrain from. And this also relates to the Buddhist path factor of right effort. What good, skillful qualities can we promote? What harmful, toxic qualities can we begin to diminish or refrain? So in this right here, these lines right here, 3 through 8, that talks about the cultivation. These are the qualities to aspire to cultivate. And then 9 and 10 there, they must refrain, from actions that will give them reproach from the wise. So there's something we can go through we see this again and again in many Buddhist practices, that we can start off with sila. We can start off with the ethics. The way that we cultivate how we are in the world inclines our mind to rest upon that. So if we're going out engaging in harm, engaging in destruction, engaging in ill will, selfishness, when we sit to meditate, what is it that we experience? We experience our grasping, our greed, our ill will, and that's difficult to rest into as a meditative state. If we can go out into the world, practice non-harm, practice compassion, practice generosity, then when we come back and we sit, we experience the effects of that in the mind that's a little bit more open, giving, pliant, calm, not burdened by remorse from actions done. The more that we are engaging in this positivity, we're kind of inclining ourselves to have more of a positive outlook too as well. So here we have this ethical component within these first lines. When we move on to the second lines, 11 through 28, it expresses loving kindness as a distinct technique of meditation or culture of mind leading to samadhi, higher consciousness induced by absorption, although that's not immediately apparent. So it says here, may all beings be well and secure. May all beings be happy. Whatever living creatures there be, without exception, weak or strong, long, huge, or middle-sized, or short, minute, or bulky, whether visible or invisible, and those living far or near, the born and those seeking birth, may all beings be happy. So how does that refer to meditation, deeper states of samadhi? Yeah? So, well, the object of focus, whatever it is that we're meditating on, be it breath, be it body sensation, that's your object of focus. So here it is, taking the object of meditation, all beings, at all times. So there's this idea of exuding giving. within the metta practice. So a metaphor I like is like how a light bulb indiscriminately shines its light in all directions. Can we indiscriminately give this sense of metta outward in all directions? So, what Buddha's doing here is taking away all these qualifiers. Like, I'm going to do it to everybody except not the short people or, the people far away. He's just saying, yeah, near, far, big, middle, doesn't matter. You are deserving to be free from harm, free from suffering. And can we take that into our minds and hearts in this practice and cultivate that? So, also, apply the taking of an object. So Buddha saying everything and applying metta towards it. So there's something that we're going to start to see in other practices when we move away from distinctly metta, but we go into vipassana shamatha jhana, applying metta towards your object of focus. According to the Visuddhimagga, metta is a solvent that melts not only one's own psychic pollutants of anger, resentment, and offensiveness, but also those of others, since it takes the approach of friendship, and even the hostile one turns into a friend. So here we have this interplay between, the object of focus in the meditation and also out in the world and reality. So there's this solvent. I like that. So the Visuddhimagga, very, very old text. Buddha Gosa is the main person putting that together. So a solvent that melts not only one's own psychic pollutants of anger, etc. So usually whenever we're aware of something, we focus on it in meditation. Well, what else is there? Is there an anger towards it? Is there a dislike towards it? Is there an aversive quality that I want to push away? So instead, if we can look at our response towards what we're looking at, and that's the big thing that the metta is about. We can take it as an object of focus, the near and the far, the big, the small, the people on 2 legs, 4 legs, wings. We can look at them, but then what's our response to it? So this is where the metta is, our response to whatever it is that we're looking at, focusing on. So usually, whatever we're looking at, there's an unconscious response that's there. Some sort of craving, aversion, unconsciousness. The 3 poisons are usually there. The hindrances are there. So our conscious response of bringing metta to it tends to just melt away that unconscious response of aversion or craving that can happen. And that's a theme that we're going to explore moving forward. Yes. All right. Moving right along. The third lines, 21 through 40 plus, underlines a total commitment to the philosophy of universal love and its personal, social, empirical extensions, loving kindness through all bodily, verbal, and mental activities. So, going to the sutta, let none deceive or decry their fellow anywhere. Let none wish others harm in resentment or in hate, just as with her own life a mother shields from hurt her own son, her only child. Let all embracing thoughts for all beings be yours. This is a metaphor that we're going to be coming back to quite often. Cultivate an all-embracing mind of love for all throughout the universe in all its height, depth, and breadth. That too is something. Love that is untroubled and beyond hatred or enmity. As you stand, walk, sit, or lie, so long as you are awake, pursue this awareness with your might. It is deemed the divine state here. Holding no more to wrong beliefs, with virtue and vision of the ultimate, and having overcome all sensual desire. Never in a womb is one born again. So there's some pretty big words there. So again, loving kindness through all bodily, verbal, and mental activities. So here, let none wish harm, resentment, or hate, cultivating embrace, the metaphor of cultivating love and protection that the mother has as you stand, walk, or lie. So the categories here are, there's actions in the body. There's actions in our speech and mental activity. Yeah, so these are the sankharas, the bodily, verbal, and mental sankharas. What does that mean? The formations, the things that are created, so to speak. So how is it that we're occupying this mind body? How is it that we are giving forth speech? So again, there's this ethics piece in how is it that we're giving out, and also what is it that we're cultivating? The more that we can get into this more refined level of understanding our own intentions in each moment, that's the samadhi path of getting into the meditation really gets us into a deeper level of looking at that intention. So just a quick reference to the Veda Vitaka Sutta. Buddha, in his enlightened form, is reflecting upon his earlier years as a spiritual aspirant, where he was just observing his mind. And he came up with this idea that some thoughts that I have lead to, sense desire, craving, ill will, and other thoughts lead to a releasing of ill will. It abides more in compassion of refraining from sense desire for generosity and non-harm. So this idea that Veda Vitaka, the two baskets sutta. So he's like, I put these thoughts in two baskets. One that essentially says, all right, I'm going to restrain and refrain from these ones that are harming. I'm going to cultivate more these ones that are leading towards non-harm. He would say the ones that were more unskillful promote vexation and muddy the path. Yeah? Whereas the more generous non-harm ones reduce vexation, make the path clearer. Yeah? So there's this idea of, can we really be aware of our thoughts, our intentions, and restraint from indulging in some versus cultivating others. So again, there's a time right now where it's like, well, it's hard to have a conversation without it polarizing, coworkers, family members, people that have different views. And it's very, very easy when we are looking from the vantage point that, in the lens that we like to see the world through, and seeing kind of the harm that's being done to it. It's very easy to bring all of that fight to it. And I'm not saying don't protest and don't stand up for your rights and don't establish boundaries. It's important to do that. But, there is that potential for the toxicity of I want to harm the other. That I want to get back at. So this is what we're looking at, is what is it? What's the harming qualities to refrain? And what are the qualities to cultivate? Later on in one point, he says, as a pattern of behavior, the first aspect of metta makes one's life grow like a tree, useful, generous, noble. Metta as meditation affects that spiritual efflorescence whereby one's entire life becomes a source of joy for all. The third part envisages in this imagery the fruition of that process of spiritual development whereby one brings about an all-embracing application of spiritual love, which can powerfully condition society as a whole and lead one to the heights of transcendental realization. So here we have this interesting thing. This practice of metta is something that can potentially have a beneficial influence on the larger system at large, and as well on our own internal system, so to speak. So we're doing it for self and others. So metta starts as an idea, a thought, a list of pleasant qualities, goodwill, friendliness, etc., etc. But analyzing the Metta Sutta, we see that it's a practice of right conduct, right concentration, samadhi, and the total commitment, personal, social, empirical extensions of the body and mind. So it can be a pretty deep practice the more that we get into it. And just a little reviewing of these final lines here. With virtue and vision of the ultimate, having overcome all sensual desire, never in a womb is one born again. That's some pretty heavy stuff right there. So with virtue, so we talked quite a bit about the ethical components, the sila, but then he says with virtue and vision of the ultimate. So these are technical terms. Vision, often refers to the application of wisdom or vipassana, you know, arriving at a deeper wisdom or the ultimate or nibbana. You know? So having ethics as well as a path leading towards awakening, you know, vision and eye towards working towards awakening. Having overcome all sense desires. So last week I talked a little bit about the effluence or the asavas, the toxic leakages that come in and kind of muddy the path. So overcoming our own sense desires, we're ridding ourselves from the deep internal seeds that want to resonate into some unskillful action that reinforces dukkha, reinforces suffering, ill will, and such. Never born again. So in a way, not reifying and not having another pattern of self come up of born of craving, aversion, unconsciousness, ill will, harm. Yeah? We're not um, we're not acting in a way that that's going to come up again. If anything, we're trying to uproot that pattern of perception and behavior. Yeah? So we're talking about deep work. That's supposed to be a little shorthand for dependent origination. We were talking about that a little bit last week, but we don't need to necessarily know that. So anyway, so here we have it. This commitment to cultivating of goodwill that extends into our actions, extend and the potential impact on society at large, as well as our being a significant contributor to our own awakening. So, no small task, no small potatoes. We're going to go into a sit. Let's do some application of this. But before we do, does anybody have any question or comment on any of the information that I went through there? Feel free to just speak up. I don't see everybody's thumbnail, so I won't see a politely raised hand.
I have one question. So when we were talking about using metta for everybody in the world, can we also kind of turn that towards like bringing metta in, like you said, to our vipassana practice or things like that, but cultivating that feeling of metta towards like feelings or emotions or hindrances that come up during our meditation, and using that kind of feeling of acceptance and goodwill towards those negative feelings that are coming up for us.
Yeah. So like in terms of like vipassana, sometimes we hear the term dry vipassana, and sometimes we hear the term wet vipassana. So wet vipassana versus dry, there's the dry observation. Oh, this is my pain arising. This is my pain dissolving. But then the wet vipassana is like, oh, here's the sensation, and I'm bringing the metta towards it. So it's a metta vipassana in that way. And when we go in future classes, we're going to be looking specifically at that skillful application of metta towards a subjective experience, be it breath, sensation, the hindrances, the awakening factors, whatever object arises, if we know what's our response. Because anything that arises in consciousness and awareness is subject to craving and aversion. So if metta, as stated earlier, is the solvent that dissolves that, then yes, we can do it in a distinct metta practice where I am the light bulb shining this light onto the world, but also, as you're stating there, Cassidy, in other practices such as vipassana, oh, here I am. I'm just aware of this dukkha arising. I'm aware of this breath arising. Well, what happens if I add some kindness to that? Or conversely, not conversely, but if you flip it, I have it in a map of the kindness or metta, but then that kindness turning towards the pain or the unpleasant. It's the compassion response. If there's the pleasant that arises, does it lead to craving? Or if we bring that kindness to it, it turns more into an appreciative joy. And then that to balance it out, that equanimity. How is it that we can have that cool, open acceptance and non-attachment towards it? So yeah, good point, Cassidy. We're going to be going that in depth, definitely, probably 2 weeks from now.
That was very helpful. Thank you.
Cool, thank you. Alrighty. So, without a further ado, let's do what we refer to as a traditional, one of many traditional metta practices. So those of you that are familiar with metta may be familiar with this practice where we're engaging in cultivating metta towards the loved one, towards the neutral person, towards the challenged person, and then so on from there. In a lot of practices, there's an absence of thinking. So this metta practice, this type of one, definitely we are engaging in thought. We're specifically engaging in bringing certain individuals to mind. For many of you, this may be familiar. For some that may be newer, allow yourself to come to a comfortable upright position. Allow yourself to straighten up and settle in. We will be practicing some metta, but we can start off with a few moments of contacting breath. So allow yourself to find your way towards the breath. Contact it in the body in whatever way feels right, appropriate, true for you this evening. So, right off the bat, we're contacting breath in whatever way it arrives in the body. Can we begin this cultivation of friendliness towards this experience of breath? Right from the bat here, just bringing this openness, this willingness to experience this friendliness towards the breath may potentially begin to shift the experience of it. On the in-breath, are there any pleasant qualities available? A certain oxygen pleasure, maybe a potential subtle joyful quality, certain invigoration of energy. Can we bring a kindness to that which we notice? And allow that in. And on the exhale, are there any pleasant qualities there? Releasing, relinquishing, grounding, settling. Whatever is pleasant about that out breath, can we bring the friendliness to that as well? Allowing ourselves potentially to have a pleasant experience of the out breath too. Discern what is present, bringing kindness towards it, allowing yourself to take it in. Whatever pleasant qualities are present, just allow yourself to feel them. Just like this idea of the tea bag steeping into hot water that begins to permeate through the water, just allowing any of these qualities of well being, openness, gladdening, and balancing be felt and permeate through the body, all while mixing with this sense of kindness to whatever degree it's there. It may be subtle, it may be fleeting, that's perfectly fine. We're just attempting to cultivate. Okay, good. So knowing that breath is always present, always available. At any point in time, you can come back to the breath if you find it a resource. But for now, let's start off with explicit metta cultivation. So, in the seeing space of the mind's eye, can you bring up a loved one, a friend, mentor, teacher, benefactor, a pet, an animal, somebody for whom it is easy for you to have positive, pleasant associations for? When they arise in your mind, do you observe your heart inclining towards openness, friendliness, goodwill? Just notice that, bringing that individual to mind, noticing how the heart responds. So, feeling that kindness, friendliness in the body, where do you feel that arise? Can you permit it? Allow it. If it wants to expand, allow it. If it wants to contract, allow it. For some people, the image component is not that strong. They're more of a verbal type. If you wish, you can use some metta phrase. May you be free from harm, free from suffering. May you know happiness. May you know peace. May you be free from harm. May you be free from suffering. May you know happiness. May you know peace. You could just put that on repeat as a mantra in between your ears, if you wish, or any other phrase that you feel helps promote the attitude of metta. If that individual begins to lose its charge, you can switch to another. Bring in another loved one, another family member, friend, mentor, benefactor, teacher, pet, whatever opens the heart. And the more that you're aware of it arising in the body, really allow yourself to steep into that. Okay, good. And we'll say goodbye to the loved one. Now we can choose a neutral person, somebody for whom, when they arise in your mind, you don't have a preference toward or against. That particular person at the office, that particular neighbor, that particular whoever. Again, you can think of one or a few or many. But can we recognize that they too, occupying this human experience, are subject to pain, suffering, anger, fear, sadness, loss? They are equally deserving to be free from harm, free from suffering. May they know happiness. May they know peace. Can we extend, exude, intend the metta towards them as well? Okay, very good. Now we can say goodbye to the neutral individual. Now, just like we're at a gym and we keep stacking a little bit more weights onto the rack, we can bring in the challenge person, somebody for whom it is for you not that easy to have a sense of kindness towards. Now, let me be clear, do not bring in the worst human being possible. We're not looking to try to bring in the most horrible monster in your life. just maybe somebody mildly unpleasant. Let's work with that. Bring them to mind. Observe how the heart may be inclined to recoil, or is the metta firmly established? Maybe we can be aware of possibly some of the unsavory behavior of this individual might be a reflection of their own unskillful experience of their suffering. May we also intend towards this person, may they be free from harm. May they be free from suffering. May they know happiness. May they know peace. Okay, good. We could say goodbye to the challenged person. Now then, as we are sitting here, reflecting upon the metaphor of the light bulb shining in all directions, can we reconnect with this metta? Maybe the breath may help with calming, concentrating. All beings, great and small, far and near, are deserving of metta. In whatever way this makes sense to you, can you exude, shine, spread the metta outward in all directions? As we feel the metta extending outward into spaciousness in front of you, outward into space to the right of you, outward from behind you, outward from the left of you, extending above and below. This focus begins to diminish the self-focus. as literally our awareness extends into spaciousness around. Whatever vastness, spaciousness you're aware of, imbuing that with metta, intending it towards all beings that lie within its path. Now then, considering where you are in space, all these other individuals that are within this particular sangha, this particular group, extending metta in all directions. You are in the path of everybody's metta. Can you also allow yourself to receive the kindness, the goodwill? If you wish, you can even practice with a subtle smile on your face as you allow the metta to enter. Not only this particular group, but all sanghas from all locations and all times, as they practice metta, are exuding it throughout time, throughout space. Allow yourself to receive. As well, allow yourself to exude, emit this bi-directional channel of receiving and giving out metta. At ease, everybody. So post-bell practice, the bell just rang. No need to end the generation of metta or the receiving of metta. So this is still a practice period, just with eyes open, engaging in conversation and concepts. It's a little bit more practice in life, but it's the game. Can you keep going, the metta, giving, receiving, as we enter into this? So I'm curious, what was your experience? What did you notice? What did you observe? What took place for you during your practice? And of course, any questions you may have. Feel free to unmute yourself and manifest, as they say.
Well, hi. Um, I have always had the most trouble with metta.
Uh-huh.
Part of it is not the concepts around it, but rather I can get into my head very easily, and so I have to keep this person in mind and do this other thing. I feel like I'm juggling when I'm doing it a little bit.
Mm. Can you identify the balls you're juggling?
Well, one ball is to keep that person in mind,
Yes.
and the other part is to be hoping, sending all the kindness and loving at the same time. I'm thinking a lot while doing it,
Yes.
and that makes it, I don't, it takes me into my head, and, when we let go of the individual and the giving and the receiving, I do that naturally in the practice, like a breathing in is about compassion for me, and breathing out is compassion for the world. But as soon as I have to, that, I don't know if the juggling, if you understand my experience.
Sure, of course. There is a lot going on. And I appreciate you being able to identify the different variables. So the way ultimately, well, it's almost like this. We have a toy boat, we put it in the water, and then we push it off. And then afterwards, we just kind of just observe it kind of go where it goes. So in a
Mm-hmm.
way, it's like we have the picture in our mind, and that kind of sets it off. But then, like, once the heart begins to open and we can feel the metta in the body, we can begin to kind of pull back from the image and then take as our primary focus the feeling of metta in the body. So
Well,
if
let
it
me add one part too. Generally, I can't create a visual image.
Okay.
So it's a more general, the idea of someone
Hmm.
somehow. So even that I'm working really like hard to create. The essence of someone, I'm not exactly. So uh, again, there's a lot of work going on, which
Sure.
takes me out of the now for me.
Well, how is it
But
that we
I like the idea of the toy boat and just
pushing off? Yeah.
pushing it
So,
off, and
so
then not, yeah.
what you report is quite common. Some people are more visual thinkers, some people are more auditory thinkers. So the people that are more auditory and less visual, this whole idea of bringing image to mind might be a little bit more effortful. So if rather than trying to create something that is not really there, I mean, it's just we're all wired differently. How is it that you can bring to mind an individual without necessarily needing to rely or impose an image on it? You just kind of have this general sense or awareness?
Yeah, it's not an actual, I mean, it's, yeah, I'm not even sure. It's kind of half between, I have this kind of very ghost-like,
Hmm.
barely an image. Like
Hmm.
I could just have a trace memory almost of an image.
Hmm. So it's fine if there's not really an image, but if you just kind of bring to mind, you just remember somebody or something, and then you notice the heart respond and open to it. You know,
Mm,
you can go back and forth a little bit. Okay, let's go into the body. Okay, let's kind of remember in whatever way feels appropriate or ease. You know, the first stage is really about ease. But again, the more that it becomes established in the body, we take that body oriented focus as your primary, and just kind of in the background is kind of the awareness of other. And then as we continue on with the challenge, where we go into the neutral person, well, they're not feeding the metta anymore. Now it's like, oh, I have to keep sustaining the metta in order to give it to this, even though it's a little easier. And then we go to the next challenge, where it's like, not only are they not feeding the metta, they're potentially detracting. How is it that we can keep the metta strong? So the earlier on in the practice that we can get a sense of where it arises in the body, how it arises in the body, how is it that we can incline it to continue on? There's phrasing that shows
the
up.
meta, where you feel the meta, is that what you mean? In the
Yeah,
body. Okay.
yeah. So, you know, there's a phrase variously in the suttas of how to enter into and abide in metta, concentration, all these various different states. So there's that sense of the initial spark, and then how do we continue to give fuel to that so that it becomes a deeply established fire. So it's like, oh, I notice the metta, I notice the pleasant qualities of the metta, I appreciate, allow that, you know, that brings rise to another moment of metta, you know, the way that we're responding to it. So it's like we're bringing metta, to the experience of metta in the body, can help sustain that.
Mm-hmm.
So if it seems like there's too many variables, I'm thinking of this person, God in the body, then there's an intending of this in this way. Yeah, it's a lot. And also, you know, like I was saying in the beginning, in many meditations, there's no thinking going on. You know, it's the dropping off of thought, or the non-engaging of thought. So this is one of the select few meditations where it's like, yeah, we are intentionally cultivating the sankharas to fight sankharas. We're intentionally creating thoughts to, you know, counterbalance some negative inclinations. So, you know, it gets a little busy. Later on, when we start to tie it into concentration, shamatha, jhana, then it can get a little bit more simplified, and we're really letting go of, you know, concepts, ideas, and symbols.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Robert.
Hi, Mike. Can I ask you something?
Hey, sure, of course.
Hi. So I actually want to find out what you think about this kind of common concern people have about metta practices, and I sometimes, still find myself struggling with it. So when it comes to bringing up people, like first the loved one, then neutral, and even the person who you have some difficulty with, it is easier to send metta to them, because there is a personal relationship, and in personal life it's such a useful way to experience a relationship. And then you can follow it up with whatever communication you want to have with them if there is a conflict.
Mm-hmm.
But when it goes beyond that, and when you're thinking about like everybody and the whole world as an abstract concept, yes, but when you start thinking about in your professional life, you may have certain people who are very difficult, where the communication is hard. It may be your leader or your boss, where to send metta to that person may mean not taking any action against whatever they are doing. Or even in public life that you mentioned, right now there's election time, a lot of things are happening, streets are on fire, you said correctly. So in these kind of situation, would metta be sort of, like not working on the fire? And yeah, I mean that's where it becomes tricky. Like when you think about a specific person, let's not go to the election and all that is very complicated. I think the further you go, but let's say in professional life you have a boss who's very difficult, and to send metta to them versus taking some action. There are certain things you could do. So is that not, does it fit together, in other words? So those actions may mean that it may not always be so good and peaceful for the person that you're thinking about.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, and I really appreciate you bringing it up, Swati. I actually wanted to address that prior to, but I got lost in the other things. Sometimes it's appropriate to act, and sometimes we all have challenged people in our lives, and sometimes they're challenging because there's some sort of harm being done in that relationship. They're asking us to compromise our ethics, our morals, asking us to give too much energy, breaking down a boundary, or maybe there's something about them that's just inflammatory. So sometimes there can be the experience of, if I just send metta to them, then it might incline us to be a little bit more tolerant, complacent, in a way where we're just continue to enable their ill will, their destructive behavior. And that's definitely something that we need to be aware of. All of this talk of peace and acceptance and love and kindness, the ultimate goal is not to become a doormat for the world. So sometimes, Swati, in cases like that, if we bring to mind the challenged person, and that's a challenging relationship, that they might ask us to be in a way where, we have to kind of shrink ourselves in a way that's unhealthy, or we're in their presence and they press our buttons. Sometimes what I like to do, and how I kind of tweak that stage of the metta practice, is notice that person come in. What shows up for you? Like, what's the habit pattern? This is the habit pattern of this boss wants me to be obsequious and just kind of do what they want, no matter how much it hurts. Or this coworker who's just annoying, has poor boundaries, tries to, can't stay in their lane, is always trying to take over, the frustration that comes up. So rather than just exuding and, kindness to them in a way that is kind of enabling of their bad behavior, can we just put some metta towards this whole dynamic? I'm standing in front of this person, I'm feeling a lot of pain, they're pressing my buttons. So sometimes I think that it's okay, there's a caveat to this stage of the practice where it's like, picture yourself with that person, a scenario with that person. There's metta towards the whole scenario, and maybe kind of redirect it back to yourself. So we can just acknowledge the pain that is truly there when you're really in the presence of this individual. And sometimes I found when I've done this practice is that my own tendency to react to that individual begins to become soothed a bit. So that rather than it's something that I repress, that person shows up, yikes, my reaction shows up of whatever it is. My own suffering component begins to diminish in their presence. And then I find that, like, when I go to work or whatever scenario that person shows up, rather than my defensiveness, my anger, or my fear and avoidance, that suffering component begins to go down. And as a result, less limbic activation and more executive functioning available. I'm more able to respond appropriately, whether that means setting a boundary or saying no or, avoiding. That's probably sometimes the most skillful response that we could have to somebody that's just inherently toxic. But the fact that spending time kind of reducing my own reactivity by sending love to that core pain, and this kind of relates a little bit to what Cassidy was asking earlier about, can we send metta to our own reactions and our own response?
Yes.
Yeah, I find that that's a way that if that challenge individual is somebody that is actually bringing some kind of like harm or detriment, and I find that that's a good way to practice that stage. And that's just me. Other teachers may not do that because it's technically, we're not exuding towards the challenge person. But I find that, if we can reduce our own suffering in the presence of that individual, have our executive functioning available, we can make the right choice.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. You're talking about like sort of self-metta or self-compassion practice
Yeah.
in order to reduce the suffering. So our brain is not hijacked with the anger and the discomfort that we're feeling towards the person. And we can then think about an effective way of dealing with the situation.
Yes.
But sometimes it may mean that that effective way may not make that, we are saying like, may you be happy, may you be peaceful to the person, but your action may not be actually making them happy and peaceful. It is making you maybe happy and peaceful, but not to them. But I think personally, the way I resolve it is by thinking about the long term versus short term. And for the good of the community versus, like one person's short-term happiness and making them feel pleasant versus something that you are giving to them. That's maybe, hopefully, important.
I think that's a good way of saying it, because in all the transactions where we're like, oh, okay, that person is happy now, but what do they say? The road to hell paved with good intentions. Sometimes the most compassionate thing to do is to say no, to say stop, to say put that down. That thing that gives you pleasure, cut it out. Denying. So there's that idea of the denial, the restraint component. So if we're the way that we show up is denying them and making them have a restraint on something that they want, that could have more of a beneficial long-term compassion for them if that helps them change.
Thank you. And then again, if we go to the politics and the world situation, it becomes even more complicated. But right now, maybe we don't want to get into that. Other questions.
Not at this moment.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much for that, Swati. We are at the top of the hour, so I want to say thank you to everybody here. Let's see, let me get you that link if anybody cares to follow up with their own research. This is a link to the Access to Insight for that particular manuscript that I was referring to.
Is it possible to send it on the email?
Well, I could potentially send it off to Anissa. I don't have everybody's the email list of everybody, but I can send that along.
So through her, that would be really great.
But for anybody else, they can just cut and paste that link there. Let's see. So a couple things. Let's see. Links to donate. I think I was just talking with Anissa, and she said that this link that I'm giving is not necessarily a good one. But let me just kind of say, these teachings are freely offered. Howsoever, Inside LA is subject to a lot of the economic insecurity that is going around. So whatever you can share, this is one of the modes of cultivating metta, is this generosity. The more that you can find it in yourself to donate to Inside LA, that can create the conditions for sustained grounds for us to come together to share the Dharma. So you could go to insidela.org, and there'll be donate buttons there. And also for everybody, I do a morning meditation sit group that's between 9 to 10 a.m. Monday through Friday Pacific time. Everybody's welcome to that. So there's the link to that. Each day we focus on a particular aspect of practice. So feel free to cut and paste that information to another document. So you're all invited to that. That of course is also free of charge. So we have a nice little community going, and please consider yourself invited to it. So I invite you all to end the evening with a dedication of merit. By the merits of these acts and other such virtues, may we attain a liberation for the benefit of all beings. We bow before those who come before us on the path, and before those who come after us on the path. Very good. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks, Mike. Have a good one.
Okay. Hope to see you all next week. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.